the key will be pre-season. There's nothing worse really than signing players perhaps midway through pre-season who've been training by themselves, or into even when the season starts and players haven't had a proper pre-season, and they're playing to catch up with the rest of the squad, and sometimes you do hear that if you can get that good pre-season in, build the blocks of the foundations, it will help a player's fitness throughout the season then, and that they perhaps will be less susceptible to picking up injuries if they've had that strong pre-season. I think when you bring players in who haven't had that, and perhaps, as you say, haven't played a lot of football in the last year or two, so their match fitness might be a little bit off, then there is a bit of a risk there. But I think they will. I'm sure they will have done a thorough medical, and Crosby did say, didn't he? I think at the end of the season, in a recent interview, and Palios mentioned it as well, about the budget, 20% of the budget being spent on players that weren't on the pitch. So surely they've learned some lessons from that. So any player that we're looking at that has had a hint of injuries in the past, you'd like to think the medical will be thorough. So we have to assume that that's been the case. And hopefully, a good pre-season, whatever it is, 6 or 7 weeks of running and getting ready for those pre-season friendlies. I think it could be a really good signing for us.
Yeah, I can understand some fans' concerns about his recent injury problems. As Dave mentioned there, we make all too much of a habit of signing players with a history of injury concerns. Think Luke Norris, Declan Drysdale, even Brad Walker as well, who we're trying to retain, which I don't understand at all, given his lack of games. But yeah, Mark Palios mentioned about, as Dave just mentioned there in his statement that he put out, about too many players being injured and still pulling wages from the budget. And that is a concern. So if he's gone and said that, you'd like to think that they have run due diligence over Bristow's fitness levels and made sure that they're not signing someone who's going to spend the majority of the season up in the stands and on the treatment table. So yeah, hopefully with a good pre-season behind him as well, with the rest of the group, he can hit the ground running. And if we can see him on the pitch anywhere approaching what we did in the 22-23 season, that'll be a real positive for the club.
Some people, though, have looked at the transfer and they've talked about how it's another returning ex-player coming back to Tranmere. And there have been a lot of them in the past who haven't necessarily been successful. I mean, there are 2 in the current squad who have very much proved successful in Joe Murphy and Connor Jennings for what they've done since they came back to Tranmere. Joe maybe to a lesser extent than his first spell, but Connor has certainly shown his worth to the club during his 2 years back at Prenton Park. And the other thing I would say is that he's only 23. It's not like Tranmere bringing a 32, 33-year-old washed-up player back who had their previous stint 7-8 years earlier and has only been on the decline since. This is a guy who could very much, and given his age, should very much still have his best days ahead of him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's one of the things that they looked at about his age and potential sell-on value, depending on whatever happens. So yeah, I think for me, it was kind of a 1-year deal. I'm not going to say we don't know what wages he's on, what he's taking out of the budget, but I'm not saying it's a low risk signing because of course he hasn't played a massive amount of football in the last year or two, but it's a 1-year deal. And look, if for whatever reason, if he did break down and had injuries, then he's on a 1-year contract, and it perhaps wouldn't cost a massive amount of money. But I'm sure, as I say, it's a thorough medical that they've carried out on him. And yeah, I agree with what you say, Matt. We've done it a few times, and there's players that have played for us in their late teens, early 20s, had a successful time, gone on elsewhere, had a career, and come back to us 32. Perhaps in the last year or two they haven't played much football, but we bring them in and it's just not worked out. So there's always a risk. But you're right though. Some have worked out. So there's a risk. But I think when you're signing players, particularly in their 30s, and particularly if they've missed games, then clearly you can't be too surprised if they end up missing games, can you? So I think with this, it's just a 1-year deal. He's 23. We've got the business done early, which, as I said, which means he'll be ready for the full pre-season. And if he can get through that, I don't see why he can't have a really solid season.
Yeah, I've got not much more to add to that, really. As I say, I was pleased with the signing. It's been an issue in that position for the last couple of seasons. The lack of quality. We've tried different players there that hasn't worked, and then square pegs in round holes when you're having to play advanced wingers in defensive positions. I think you're always going to be at risk of defensive calamities, which we saw towards the end of last season, despite the form of the team picking up. So, no, good signing, and hopefully it's the first of many. The good thing is, I think Crosby's clearly identified that area as an issue. It'd have been quite easy to have given Connor Wood another 1 or 2 year deal and to plodded on with him, but he's obviously looked at it and thought, well, Connor Wood is not going to suit the system that I want to play. He doesn't offer enough going forward. He's not physical enough. He loses his man far too easy. And this is not me going in on Connor Wood. It's just that I feel that the quality in him wasn't quite there last season. So, yeah, hopefully Bristow is an upgrade on that position.